In the beginning, before there was breath, before there was sound, there was only silence. Not the silence of a still forest or the hush before sleep, but a silence so complete it had no edges, no measure, no meaning. It was called Ginnungagap, the yawning void, the vast emptiness that stretched beyond all thought. There was no earth, no sky, no fire, no ice. There was no day to bring light, and no night to bring darkness. There was only nothingness, endless and deep. Yet within this nothingness stirred the seeds of everything that would one day be. To the north of the great void lay a realm of pure frost and mist, a place called Niflheim. It was the land of ice, where rivers of frozen venom trickled slowly, heavy with poison and cold. To the south of the void lay Muspelheim, a realm of flame and searing heat, where sparks and embers whirled in eternal chaos. And so the emptiness rested between two extremes, frost and fire, silence and roar. As the ages drifted without name, something miraculous occurred. The frost of Niflheim met the fire of Muspelheim in the heart of the void, and from that meeting came a whisper of movement, a stirring of life. Where ice melted against flame, drops formed, and from those drops arose the first being, Ymir, the great giant, vast and ancient, a creature of both frost and fire. Ymir was alone, yet within him slumbered many. For as he lay upon the void, more drops formed, and from them came a cow named Audumla, whose milk was rivers of nourishment. She licked the salty rime of ice, and as she licked, shape began to emerge. The first of the gods, Buri, tall and strong. From Buri came his son Bor, and from Bor and Bestla, the daughter of giants, came three sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. These brothers, young in the dawn of creation, looked upon Ymir and felt unease. For though Ymir was the ancestor of giants, his form was wild, his heart dark, and his children multiplied without harmony. The brothers knew that if there was to be order, the chaos of Ymir must end. And so, with courage not yet known to the worlds, they slew the giant. Ymir fell, and from his blood poured forth rivers that drowned his offspring, save a few who hid in the shadows. From his flesh they formed the earth, from his bones the mountains, from his teeth the stones. His blood became the seas, his skull the dome of the heavens, and from the sparks of Muspelheim they set stars within that dome to glitter. The world was no longer empty, it had shape and form and wonder, yet it was still unfinished, still silent. It was then that Odin and his brothers took driftwood from the shore. From one piece they carved a man, from another a woman. Odin breathed into them the breath of life, Vili gave them understanding and movement, and Ve granted them senses, sight, and speech. They became the first humans, Ask and Embla. They stood upon the newly formed earth, trembling but alive, their eyes wide with wonder at a world so vast. But the brothers knew this new world needed more than humans, mountains, and seas. It needed a spine, a pillar, a living bridge that would hold together what was and what would come. And so, from the deep roots of creation itself, there began to grow a tree. It was not an ordinary tree, but one that shimmered with a glow neither of fire nor frost. Its trunk was broad enough that no giant could encircle it, and its branches reached so high they brushed the heavens. Its roots plunged deeper than sight, winding through worlds unseen. This was Yggdrasil, the cosmological tree, the axis of existence. Yggdrasil grew silently, steadily, its leaves unfurling with the whisper of destiny. Each leaf shimmered with a green unlike any other, a green that promised life eternal. The branches spread and spread until they touched the skies of Asgard, where the gods would dwell. The roots reached into the depths of Niflheim, drinking from the well of icy fate. Another root pierced into Jotunheim, the land of giants, binding their restless strength to the order of the cosmos. In time, Yggdrasil became more than a tree. It was a bridge, a map, a keeper of secrets. It was the great connection between the 9 worlds: Asgard, Midgard, Jotunheim, Niflheim, Muspelheim, Vanaheim, Alfheim, Svartalfheim, and Helheim. Upon its branches perched creatures of legend, and beneath its roots coiled powers older than the gods themselves. The gods gathered beneath its shade, marveling at its strength. Odin, who ever sought wisdom, looked upon Yggdrasil and knew that within its roots and branches lay the answers to questions not yet asked. He felt the pull of destiny within its bark, the song of time upon its leaves. But Yggdrasil was not merely a gift, it was also a burden, for in its vastness dwelled dangers, whispers of decay, creatures that gnawed and clawed, reminding all who looked upon it that nothing, not even the eternal tree, was free from struggle. Yet on that first day of its birth, when the winds of creation still lingered in the air, Yggdrasil stood proud and unbroken. Its crown shimmered with light from the stars, its roots drank deeply from the primal wells, and its trunk held firm as the spine of all reality. The 9 worlds were young, their stories unwritten, their fates unsealed. The gods gazed upon them with awe. The humans, Ask and Embla, lifted their eyes to the branches above, wondering what powers watched from those unseen realms. The giants stirred in their distant lands, their hearts restless with the memory of Ymir. And beneath it all, Yggdrasil stood, a silent witness, a living thread tying everything together. For as long as the tree endured, so too would the worlds. And as long as its leaves whispered in the cosmic winds, the tales of gods and men, of giants and dwarves, of fate and freedom, would unfold across its endless branches. And so begins the story of Yggdrasil, the tree that was not merely a tree but the very soul of the cosmos, the bridge between the known and the unknown, the guardian of all that was, is, and shall be. Beneath the vast trunk of Yggdrasil, deeper than eyes could follow, lay its roots, 3 great tendrils that stretched into the heart of the cosmos. These roots were not only anchors keeping the tree steady, but also pathways to mysteries so ancient that even Odin himself bowed to their wisdom. The first root plunged into Niflheim, the land of frost and shadows. There, in the coldest reaches, lay the well called Hvergelmir. From this well flowed countless rivers, icy streams that wound their way through the realms. At the edge of the well coiled Nidhugga, the dragon serpent, gnawing endlessly at the root, its teeth sharp with malice. The sound of its chewing echoed like thunder in the stillness of the underworld. Nidhugga was not alone. Lesser serpents writhed around him, biting at the root, eager to drink of the life that flowed through Yggdrasil. Yet no matter how much they gnawed, the root held strong, for the tree's will was greater than their hunger. The second root pierced into Jotunheim, the land of the giants. Here it sank deep into the well of Mimir. This was no ordinary well, but a spring of wisdom, ancient and fathomless. It was guarded by Mimir, the keeper of memory, whose knowledge of the past and the hidden threads of fate was unmatched. His well was fed not by rivers of water, but by the very essence of understanding, a clear pool reflecting all that had been and all that could be. Odin himself, hungering for wisdom beyond the reach of gods, would one day come to Mimir's well and offer a sacrifice greater than gold or jewels. But that tale belongs to another chapter. The third route reached into Asgard, the realm of the gods. Here lay the most sacred of the wells, Urdarbrunna, the well of Urd, or the well of fate. It was a place of stillness, yet also of movement, for in its waters swam the threads of all destinies, past, present, and future. The well was tended by three figures, beings who were not quite goddesses, not quite mortals, but something older, the Norns. The first was Urd, the past. She was as ancient as memory, her eyes heavy with the weight of all that had been. The second was Verdandi, the present. She was radiant and alive, ever-changing, like a flame flickering in the wind. The third was Skuld, the future. She was veiled and quiet, her gaze fixed on horizons unseen, her hands weaving patterns no one could fully grasp. Together the Norns drew water from the well of Urd and sprinkled it upon the roots of Yggdrasil so that it might remain green and unbroken. They also took the clay that lay beside the well and smeared it upon the trunk, ensuring that decay and rot could not claim it. In this way the Norns cared for the tree, and in turn the tree carried their whispers through its branches so that fate itself rustled in the leaves. Every day the gods would gather by the well of Urd to hold their council. They came not only to speak, but to listen, for the Norns carved runes into the wood, etching fate into the bark of time. None could escape what was written there, not the gods, not the giants, not even Yggdrasil itself. Fate was not cruel, but neither was it kind. It simply was. The roots of Yggdrasil were not quiet places. Each had its keepers, each had its dangers, each had its secrets. At Vergelmir, the venomous rivers whispered of decay. At Mimir's well, knowledge glimmered like a star, but always at a price. At Urd's well, destiny wove itself with threads invisible, binding all beings together. Yet the tree stood strong, nourished by these roots, balanced between wisdom, fate, and the shadows of destruction. Above the roots, creatures scurried and whispered. A squirrel named Ratatosk darted up and down the trunk, carrying insults between the eagle who perched high in the branches and Nidhöggr who gnawed below. His chatter never ceased, for he delighted in stirring quarrels. Between roots and branches, stags grazed upon Yggdrasil's leaves, their antlers glistening as they fed, while beneath them the wells shimmered with truths too heavy for mortal hearts. The gods often looked upon the roots with unease. They knew Yggdrasil was the pillar of their world, yet they also knew it was constantly under threat. The gnawing of Nidhöggr, the whispers of fate, the weight of wisdom, these were not burdens the tree bore lightly. Odin, most of all, listened. When the winds rustled through Yggdrasil's leaves, he heard not only a breeze, but the voices of destiny. He knew that the life of the gods, the survival of men, and the balance of giants all depended upon the endurance of this tree. Still, Yggdrasil endured. Its bark was unyielding, its roots deep, its branches vast. It drank from the three wells, one of venom, one of wisdom, one of fate, and in that balance it lived. For those who stood beneath its shadow, the tree was more than wood and leaf. It was a reminder that wisdom must be sought even when the price is heavy, that fate cannot be outrun, no matter how swift the feet, that destruction lurks always, gnawing at the edges, but life continues in spite of it. The humans, Ask and Embla, often gazed upon the trunk from afar, seeing only a fraction of its majesty, yet feeling its presence in every gust of wind, every ripple of water, every breath they drew. They did not know of Nidhöggr or Mimir, nor of the Norns who carved runes into its bark. Yet they sensed the truth, that all life was bound to the tree, that their fates too hung like leaves upon its branches, and in this way Yggdrasil became not only the bridge of worlds, but the very heart of meaning, a tree that grew not for itself, but for all. The trunk of Yggdrasil was unlike any other trees. It was vast, wider than mountains, taller than clouds, stretching from the deepest roots in shadow to the highest leaves kissed by the stars. Its bark shimmered faintly, as if alive with hidden runes, pulsing with the quiet heartbeat of the cosmos. To walk near it was to feel both awe and smallness, as though one stood before the breathing spine of the world itself. And yet, though the trunk was sacred, it was not silent. Life swarmed upon it, within it, and across its endless bark. For Yggdrasil was not only the pillar of creation, it was also home to many creatures, some playful, some mischievous, and some dangerous. High above, near the crown of branches, an eagle made its nest. It was no ordinary eagle, but a creature of immense wisdom and piercing sight. Its wings, when spread, darkened the heavens like a storm. Its eyes could see across worlds, peering into the halls of Asgard, the mountains of Jotunheim, the seas of Midgard. From its perch it gazed upon the unfolding of fate, silent but ever watchful. The gods often wondered what secrets it carried in its gaze, but the eagle never spoke. Its silence was deeper than words, as if it knew truths no tongue could bear to utter. Between the eagle's eyes sat a hawk named Vedrfolnir, swift and sharp, who carried the eagle's unspoken messages in the beating of its wings. It darted through the sky, weaving between branches, a flicker of speed and sound. When mortals glimpsed sudden movements in the heavens, they believed it was lightning, but sometimes it was only Vedrfolnir, streaking across the sky with secrets too quick to catch. Far below, upon the trunk itself, scurried Ratatosk, the squirrel. His fur was the color of withered leaves, and his eyes sparkled with mischief. Ratatosk delighted in trouble. Day and night he ran up and down Yggdrasil, carrying words between the eagle above and Nidurga below. Yet what he carried were not mere words, but insults, sharpened and twisted. "Great eagle," Ratatosk would call as he scampered upward. "Nidurga says your wings are heavy with age, and soon you will fall from the sky." And when he descended, whiskers twitching with glee, he would whisper to the serpent, "Mighty Nidurga, the eagle says your teeth are dull and your bite has no sting." Neither insult was true, yet both stung. The eagle's feathers ruffled, and Nidurga's tail lashed in anger. The squirrel laughed, never tiring of sowing discord. Some say his chatter was the echo of gossip itself, a reminder that even in the grandest of creations, the pettiness of quarrel can gnaw as deeply as teeth. But Ratatosk was not the only creature to call the trunk its home. Upon Yggdrasil's bark grazed 4 great stags, Dain, Divalin, Dunair, and Durathor. Their antlers gleamed with morning dew, and their mouths never ceased in their feeding. They nibbled constantly upon the leaves and bark, yet the tree did not wither. For Yggdrasil's strength was boundless, and its leaves grew as quickly as they were eaten. The stags symbolized the endless hunger of life, the taking and the giving, the cycle that never ceased. When the wind blew through their antlers, it made a sound like distant horns, as though signaling battles not yet fought. Some gods claimed that the stags carried messages in those tones, whispers from one world to another. Others said they were only beasts blind to meaning. Yet still their presence reminded all who looked upon Yggdrasil that even the eternal tree bore the weight of endless consumption, and yet endured. Birds of many colors also nested in the branches, their songs drifting like threads of memory. Some songs were sweet, bringing calm to weary travelers. Others were sharp, like riddles, leaving listeners uneasy, as if they had heard a truth too strange to keep. The birds were said to carry the voices of the dead, perched between life and death, singing what mortals could not understand. And then there were the hidden creatures, the tiny worms that burrowed into the bark, the spiders that wove webs from branch to branch, the unseen beings that whispered only in dreams. For Yggdrasil was not only grand and vast, but intimate and close. Its life held all lives, from the mightiest eagle to the smallest crawling thing. Yet not all who dwelled upon Yggdrasil brought harmony. The gnawing of the stags, the squabbles stirred by Ratatosk, the silent watch of the eagle, the ceaseless chewing of Nidugga, these were reminders that even within the pillar of existence, struggle lived alongside beauty. Odin often stood before the trunk, his one eye turned upward to the eagle, then downward to the roots. He listened to the squirrels' chatter, the stags grazing, the rustle of wings. To others, it might seem a chaos of sound. To Odin, it was the voice of the cosmos. Each sound carried meaning, each creature a lesson. The eagle's silence taught patience. Ratatosk's mischief warned of gossip's power. The stag's hunger spoke of life's unending need. Even Nidugga's gnawing was a truth, that all things, no matter how eternal, face decay. Mortals who passed near Yggdrasil's trunk sometimes felt a presence, as though the bark itself was aware of them. They spoke of dreams that came after resting beneath its shade, dreams of soaring as an eagle, of running with stags, of whispering as a squirrel. Some dreams were gentle, others terrifying. Yet all carried the sense that Yggdrasil was not merely a tree, but a watcher, alive with countless eyes unseen. Still, the trunk stood tall and unbroken. It bore the weight of the 9 worlds with ease, carrying their stories, their quarrels, their fates. Like the gods themselves, it was not free from conflict, yet it endured. And in its endurance lay its majesty. For the trunk of Yggdrasil was more than wood and bark. It was the very road upon which messages travelled, the path for whispers and winds, the stage for the drama of life. From root to crown, it held every voice, every hunger, every struggle, and every song. And in its silence between sounds, it held something deeper still, the promise that all things, no matter how divided, were part of the same whole. The crown of Yggdrasil spread wider than the eye could follow, and its roots plunged deeper than thought could fathom. Within this living pillar lay the balance of the cosmos, for it held not one world, but 9. Each world was distinct, yet none existed alone. Like beads on a string, like pearls upon a single thread, they hung together, woven by the branches and roots of the eternal tree. To wander in one world was to catch the scent of another. To dream in Midgard was to hear echoes from Alfheim. To fight in Asgard was to shake the stones of Jotunheim. Yggdrasil was not simply the bridge of these realms, it was their blood and bone, the silent web that bound their destinies together. Let us travel in story across these 9 worlds. Asgard, realm of the Aesir. High upon the upper branches of Yggdrasil rested Asgard, home of the Aesir gods. It was a shining land where golden halls gleamed against the heavens. The greatest of these halls was Valhalla, the hall of the slain, where Odin welcomed warriors who had fallen bravely in battle. Its roof was made of golden shields, its rafters of spears, and within it endless feasting rang with laughter and the clash of drinking horns. Yet Asgard was not only for feasting. It was a realm of watchfulness where gods plotted the fates of men, where oaths were sworn and broken, where wisdom was both treasured and feared. The Bifrost, the rainbow bridge, arched between Asgard and Midgard, glowing with fiery colours. Heimdall, the ever-vigilant, stood guard there, his ears so sharp he could hear grass grow, his eyes so keen he could see to the ends of the worlds. Asgard's beauty was unmatched, but its strength was born of struggle. The Aesir knew well that enemies stirred beyond their shining walls. Giants in Jotunheim plotted against them, and even within their own halls, betrayal sometimes whispered. For though Asgard glittered, it was not free of shadows. Midgard, the world of men. Suspended at the center of Yggdrasil lay Midgard, the realm of humankind. To the gods it seemed humble, fields of soil, seas that roared, forests that whispered with wind. But to Ask and Embla, the first humans, Midgard was everything. It was encircled by a vast sea, so wide no mortal could cross it. In those waters lay the monstrous serpent Jörmungandr, child of Loki, so large it encircled the entire world, biting its own tail. When it shifted, storms rose. When it breathed, waves thundered. Mortals built their homes, ploughed their fields, raised their children, all while beneath them coils stirred that could crush mountains. Yet despite dangers, Midgard thrived. Men and women sang songs, carved runes, told tales of gods and heroes. They looked up at the branches of Yggdrasil, knowing they were not alone in the cosmos. Though their lives were brief, their stories echoed far, carried upward by the winds that rustled through the trees' leaves. Vanaheim, realm of the Vanir. Beyond Midgard, in a softer branch of Yggdrasil, lay Vanaheim, home of the Vanir gods. Unlike the Aesir, who cherished war and order, the Vanir were masters of fertility, nature, and prosperity. Their land was green and fertile, with rivers that shimmered and fields that never withered. Here lived Njord, god of the sea, and his children, Freya and Freya. Freya brought peace and good harvests, while Freya, radiant and fierce, taught the mysteries of love and the magic of Seder. The Aesir and Vanir were once enemies, locked in bitter war. Their battles shook Yggdrasil, their rage burned through realms. But in time a truce was forged, sealed by the exchange of hostages. The Vanir sent Njord and his children to dwell in Asgard, and the Aesir sent others to Vanaheim. Thus peace was born, fragile but enduring, and the realms learned that even gods must compromise. Jotunheim, land of giants. Far across Yggdrasil's trunk lay Jotunheim, the land of the giants. It was a harsh realm of mountains and storms, wild rivers and endless forests. The giants, or Jötnar, were as old as Ymir himself, born of chaos, strength, and cunning. Some giants were brutish and cruel, wielding strength without thought. Others were wise, keepers of ancient secrets the gods themselves coveted. Loki, the trickster, was counted among them, though he dwelt often in Asgard. The gods and giants were bound in eternal conflict, yet also in strange kinship. For many gods took giants as lovers, and from these unions were born beings of great power. Still mistrust lingered. Jotunheim's halls echoed with plots, its mountains with thunderous footsteps. From here would come foes who would one day challenge the gods at Ragnarök. Alfheim, realm of the light elves. In a luminous branch of Yggdrasil lay Alfheim, land of the light elves. They were beings of great beauty, shining with an otherworldly glow, lighter than air, swifter than wind. They danced in meadows of eternal bloom, their music flowing like streams, their laughter brighter than dawn. The elves were not gods, nor were they men. They were something between, closer to dreams than to flesh. Some said they guided mortals, whispering inspiration into the hearts of poets and musicians. Others claimed their beauty was dangerous, luring wanderers into enchantments from which they never returned. Alfheim was ruled by Freya, gifted to him as a child, and under his hand, the elves flourished. Mortals looked to the stars and sometimes felt that Alfheim's light touched them, guiding their paths in ways unseen. Svartalfheim, realm of the dwarves. Deep within the roots of Yggdrasil, in caverns lit by forge fire, lay Svartalfheim, home of the dwarves, also called dark elves. Unlike the light elves of Alfheim, the dwarves dwelled underground, masters of craft and smithing. Their hands forged wonders no god could rival. It was they who made Odin's spear Gungnir, Thor's hammer Mjolnir, and Freya's necklace Brisingamen. Their forges rang day and night, sparks flying like stars, smoke curling like whispers. The dwarves were secretive, greedy at times, yet brilliant beyond measure. They prized gold and jewels, and many a mortal tale spoke of men lost in their caverns, dazzled by riches, never to return. Yet without the dwarves, the gods would have been weaker, their treasures fewer. Niflheim, realm of mist and ice. Cold, dark, and endless, Niflheim lay beneath one of Yggdrasil's roots. It was the land of frost, where venomous rivers flowed, their waters biting like poison. Mist cloaked every shadow, and in its heart lay Hvergelmir, the well from which all rivers sprang. Here dwelt Nidhöggr, gnawing at the root of Yggdrasil, his hunger endless. Around him writhed serpents and monsters, feeding on decay. It was said that when souls of the wicked passed into hell, Nidhöggr feasted upon them, his jaws dripping with venom. Niflheim was not a place of warmth or joy. It was the cold reminder that destruction lurked always beneath creation, that death was as real as life. Muspelheim, realm of fire. In stark contrast to Niflheim lay Muspelheim, a world of flame and fury. It was the land of fire giants, ruled by Surtur, whose sword burned brighter than the sun. From Muspelheim had come the sparks that lit the stars and gave warmth to the young cosmos. But fire was not only life, it was also ruin. The gods feared Surtur, for it was foretold that in the end he would rise with his flaming sword and set the world ablaze. Muspelheim was a place of restless energy, forever burning, forever consuming, waiting for the day its flames would be unleashed. Helheim, realm of the dead. Last among the nine was Helheim, the land of the dead. It lay deep within the roots of Yggdrasil, cold and shadowed, ruled by Hel, daughter of Loki. Her face was half fair, half corpse-like, a reflection of her dominion, half life, half death. Here came those who did not die in battle, farmers who passed quietly in their fields, children who succumbed to illness, women who grew old and weary, all found their way to Helheim. It was not a place of torment, nor of reward. It was simply the resting ground of those forgotten by Valhalla. Yet there were darker corners within Helheim, places where Hel kept the wicked and oath-breakers, binding them in chains of ice. For though she was not cruel, she was stern, and her justice was final. Together these 9 worlds formed the tapestry of existence. Each had its place, its role, its story. And Yggdrasil held them all, weaving them into one vast design. To the gods, the 9 worlds were their dominion. To mortals, they were mysteries beyond reach. To Yggdrasil, they were simply branches, roots, and leaves, parts of a whole, inseparable, eternal. And though the worlds often clashed, Aesir against giants, fire against ice, men against death, they were bound. No battle, no feud, no hatred could sever them, for they were all tied to the same tree. The rustle of Yggdrasil's leaves carried their songs, their sorrows, their secrets. And those who listened closely could sometimes hear all 9 at once, whispering together in the endless wind. High above the winds, above the reach of storms and the cry of eagles, rose the crown of Yggdrasil. Its branches stretched wide across the heavens, shimmering with leaves of endless green. They whispered in tones not heard by mortal ears, carrying the weight of countless ages. Each leaf was said to reflect the light of the cosmos, glowing faintly as though it drank both the warmth of Muspelheim's fire and the chill of Niflheim's frost. The crown of the tree was a place of wonder. Clouds wove themselves around its branches like silver scarves, and stars rested upon its highest boughs. Some said that when mortals gazed upon the night sky, what they saw as constellations were truly the faraway leaves of Yggdrasil, sparkling as they caught the eternal light. Among these shining boughs rested Asgard, the radiant realm of the Aesir gods. It was not merely built upon the branches, it was woven into them, its golden halls and winding paths shining as though part of the tree itself. The shining halls of Asgard. The gods' realm was a place of majesty. At its heart stood Gladsheim, Odin's great hall, where high thrones were set for all the gods of Asgard. It was here that the council of the Aesir gathered, their voices echoing with decisions that shaped the fate of the 9 worlds. Odin's seat, the Hlidskjalf, was set higher than the rest, from which he could see across every realm, watching men and giants alike. But the most famous of Asgard's halls was Valhalla, where the slain heroes dwelled. It stood so vast that 500 doors opened to it, and through each door could march 800 warriors at once. Within, long tables stretched endlessly, laden with food and drink. The boar Sehrimnir was slaughtered each day and restored each night, its meat never failing. The goat Heidrun grazed upon Yggdrasil's branches, and from her udders flowed mead enough to fill every drinking horn. Here the Einherjar, the chosen warriors of Odin, feasted and fought. Each morning they battled fiercely upon the fields, clashing with sword and spear, their cries shaking the air. Each evening they rose whole again, their wounds healed, to feast in Valhalla's golden glow, for they trained and prepared not for joy alone, but for the final battle to come at Ragnarök. Other halls glittered across Asgard as well. Folkvanga, the meadow of the goddess Freya, welcomed half of those slain in battle. Her hall, Sessrumnir, was filled with beauty and music, softer than the warrior cries of Valhalla, yet equally eternal. Bilskirnir, Thor's hall, was the largest of all, with 540 rooms, its roof braced with strength as mighty as its owner. Breidablik, Baldur's shining hall, was pure and spotless, a place where no lie or falsehood could enter. Each hall reflected its god, each glimmered like a jewel upon Yggdrasil's crown, the Rainbow Bridge. From the branches of Yggdrasil stretched the Bifrost, the rainbow bridge that linked Asgard to Midgard. Its colours arched across the sky, shimmering with fire to ward off intruders. Mortals saw it as a rainbow, a fleeting vision after storms, but in truth it was the shining road of the gods. Heimdall stood watch at its end, ever vigilant. He was the whitest of the gods, his senses sharper than any other. He needed less sleep than a bird, could hear the grass grow, and see leagues into the distance. His horn, Gjallarhorn, rested by his side, and it was said that when he blew it, its sound would shake all 9 worlds, summoning the gods to battle at the world's end. Bifrost was more than a bridge, it was a symbol. It connected gods to men, the heavens to the earth, reminding mortals that the divine was never too far from reach, and reminding gods that their fate, too, was tied to humankind. The gods of Asgard walked proudly among their shining halls, yet each carried burdens as heavy as crowns. Odin, the All-Father, wise and one-eyed, ruled with foresight. He sought knowledge in every corner, trading even his eye at Mimir's well for wisdom. Upon his shoulders perched two ravens, Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, who flew each day across the worlds and returned with tidings. Though he ruled Asgard, Odin knew well that his reign was only borrowed time, that fate already whispered of Ragnarok. Frigg, Odin's wife, was the queen of Asgard, a goddess of foresight and motherhood. She spun clouds into shapes and saw what was yet to come, though she seldom spoke of it. Thor, the Thunderer, strode across Asgard with hammer in hand, protector of gods and men alike. His hall rang with laughter, but his footsteps shook like storms. With Mjolnir, he defended Asgard against giants, his fury a wall against chaos. Balder, the Shining One, beloved of all, was light and purity. His presence alone brought joy, yet his fate was shadowed, for dreams foretold of his death, a sorrow that would pierce Asgard's heart. Tyr, one-handed, brave beyond measure, embodied courage and sacrifice. He had thrust his hand into the jaws of Fenrir the wolf, so the beast could be bound, losing it forever, yet gaining honor eternal. Loki, the trickster, wandered the halls as both ally and foe. His words were sharp, his mind quick, his deeds both helpful and ruinous. Some loved him, some hated him, but none could ignore him. Many others dwelled in Asgard, each with their stories, each bound to the branches of Yggdrasil, each carrying destinies both glorious and grim. The whispering leaves. Though Asgard glittered, the gods never forgot the crown upon which they lived was also a living thing. The leaves of Yggdrasil whispered above them, and when the wind stirred, the sound was like the sighs of time itself. Sometimes Odin would walk alone into the highest boughs, resting beneath the shade of a leaf larger than a ship's sail. There he would listen. The whispers told him not of what he wished to hear, but of what he needed. They spoke of cycles unbroken, of fates woven too tightly to escape. Thor, less patient, often dismissed the leaves as idle wind. Yet even he, in quiet moments, would look upward, a shadow of thought crossing his brow as though some truth stirred in him unbidden. To mortals the leaves were beyond reach, yet their rustle carried down upon the winds that swept Midgard. Farmers in their fields sometimes paused, feeling the breeze and sensing, though they could not explain, that something vast had just sighed above them. Poets caught those whispers and turned them into song, never knowing their words were shaped by the voice of Yggdrasil itself, the balance of glory and shadow. Though Asgard shone brightest among the 9 worlds, its light was not without shadow. The gods knew that their halls, their strength, their laughter, all of it was temporary. For every hall in Asgard was also a hall of preparation. Every feast was a gathering before war. Every joy was a fragile flame, burning against the cold wind of fate. And above them all, the crown of Yggdrasil endured. It held Asgard in its embrace, yet also reminded the gods that they were but one realm among 9. Their strength was great, but not eternal. Their wisdom was deep, but not infinite. The rustle of the leaves was always there, like a heartbeat reminding them that they too were part of the greater whole. And so Asgard gleamed, both glorious and fragile. A realm of feasts, of courage, of songs, but also of destiny, of whispers, of looming doom. Suspended upon the branches of Yggdrasil, it shone like a jewel, but one day even jewels may crack. The crown of Yggdrasil glimmered with eternal leaves, but they were not mere foliage. Each leaf was a page of a cosmic book, inscribed with truths unseen, their veins carrying whispers of fate itself. When the wind stirred the branches, the leaves rustled not in random music, but in language, soft eternal, secret. It was said that those who could truly listen might hear the weaving of destiny itself. No mortal could climb so high as to touch them, yet their voices drifted down the trunk, down into the 9 worlds. Some said this was why dreams came to mortals in the quiet hours of night, for dreams were but fragments of Yggdrasil's leaves carried down on invisible breezes. Odin and the leaves of prophecy. Odin, the All-Father, often walked into the highest reaches of the tree where the leaves grew widest and oldest. There he would close his single eye and listen. He heard things no other god dared to seek, the distant cry of Fenrir in chains, the breaking of bonds not yet broken, the footsteps of giants yet unborn, and the laughter of Loki echoing in fire. The leaves spoke to him of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. They told of flames that would devour the heavens, of frost that would shatter the earth, of the tree itself trembling as serpents rose from beneath the sea. And though Odin sought wisdom to prevent it, the leaves never lied. They told not of if, but of when. And yet Odin did not despair. He listened to the whispers not as a man listens to doom, but as a king listens to counsel. "If fate cannot be changed," he said softly, "then it can at least be faced with honor." The squirrels and the messengers. While gods pondered the whispers with solemnity, Yggdrasil had messengers of its own, creatures who moved along its vast trunk and branches, carrying tales, insults, and truths alike. Foremost among them was the mischievous squirrel Ratatoska. Small and nimble, he darted up and down the trunk with endless chatter. His sharp tongue carried words from the dragon Nidhögg at the roots to the great eagle perched in the crown. Yet Ratatoska did not soften the messages. He twisted them, sharpened them, stirred strife with them. To the eagle he carried mocking words from the dragon. To the dragon he carried insults from above. Thus the two grew ever more wrathful, their hatred boiling with each whisper, while Ratatoska laughed and scampered, delighting in the discord. Mortals often wondered why such a trivial creature was allowed to dwell upon so mighty a tree. But in truth, Ratatoska's endless stirring mirrored the nature of fate itself. For even among gods and giants, much strife arose from words misunderstood, from whispers carried wrongly. And thus, in his scurrying, Ratatoska embodied the very pettiness that could unravel empires. The eagle and the hawk. At the top of Yggdrasil perched a mighty eagle, vast as the sky itself. Its wings, when spread, cast shadows across Asgard, and its eyes pierced all realms with unerring sight. Yet even this eagle was not alone. Between its eyes sat a hawk named Vedrfolnir, swift of wing, sharper of gaze. The eagle looked down upon all 9 worlds, judging from on high. It was said that its wisdom was older than many of the gods, for it had watched the birth of the worlds from its perch. Yet even wisdom could sour into disdain, and the eagle's voice often thundered with scorn for the writhing dragon below. Vedrfolnir, meanwhile, darted swiftly through the skies, carrying the eagle's words to faraway realms. The hawk's wings cut through storms, faster than lightning, faster than thought, and wherever it flew, omens followed. Together, eagle and hawk watched the tree's crown, their rivalry with Nidhögg echoing through the trunk. And always Ratatoska darted between them, fanning hatred with mischief. The 3 Norns at the well of fate, yet not all whispers came from leaves alone. At the roots of Yggdrasil, near the well of Urd, dwelled the Norns, the weavers of destiny. 3 sisters they were, Urd, that which has been, Verdandi, that which is becoming, and Skuld, that which is yet to be. Day by day they tended the tree, sprinkling its roots with water from the well, keeping Yggdrasil alive against the gnawing of the dragon. But their true labor was the weaving of fates. With threads unseen, they spun destinies for gods and mortals alike, knotting the strands of life together, cutting them when time demanded. The Norns listened not to the rustling of leaves, for they did not need to. They were the rustling. Every sigh of Yggdrasil's crown was an echo of their weaving. Every whisper of fate carried down its branches was born from their hands. Even Odin, wise though he was, could not command the Norns. He could only ask, and they would answer as they pleased. For they wove destiny not out of loyalty to gods or giants, but because it was their nature. Dreams in the mortal world. In Midgard, mortals felt the whispers of Yggdrasil in ways they could not explain. A farmer might wake at dawn with a sudden dread, sensing a storm long before clouds gathered. A warrior might dream of his own death upon a battlefield he had never seen. A mother might hum a lullaby she did not know she knew, words carried by the rustle of unseen leaves. Such dreams were not random. They were shadows cast by the Norns weaving, fragments of Yggdrasil's whispers slipping into the minds of those sensitive enough to feel them. Most ignored such signs, dismissing them as idle fancy. But the wise, the skalds, the seers, the shamans listened carefully. They knew that the rustle of Yggdrasil was the voice of fate carried upon the wind, the burden of knowing. Yet what did it mean to hear fate? Was it a blessing or a curse? Odin believed it was both. Knowledge gave him strength, but it also gave him sorrow. He knew of Ragnarök long before the other gods, and though he prepared as best he could, the burden of that knowledge weighed heavily upon him. Thor, in contrast, preferred not to listen. He lived for the moment, for the joy of feasting, the thrill of battle, the laughter of comrades. What use, he thought, was there in knowing doom, if doom could not be stopped? Better to live gloriously and meet fate head-on than to cower beneath its shadow. Among mortals, too, this divide appeared. Some sought omens in every bird, every dream, every whisper of wind. Others ignored them, choosing to walk blindly. Yet in truth, none could escape the weaving of the Norns. To hear or not to hear, it mattered little. The threads were already tied, the eternal murmuring. And so Yggdrasil whispered, and the 9 worlds listened, whether they knew it or not. The eagle glared at the dragon. The dragon hissed at the eagle. Ratatoska carried words like fire. The Norns wove without pause, and Odin strained his ear for truths that cut deeper than any sword. The leaves never ceased their murmuring. By day their whispers mingled with sunlight, soft and golden. By night they became like starlight, cold and sharp, each sigh carrying secrets from one age to the next. They spoke of beginnings, of endings, of cycles unbroken. And somewhere, in the quiet between rustles, there was also comfort. For though the whispers carried doom, they also carried continuity. Yggdrasil would tremble, yes, but even in Ragnarök, even when the 9 worlds burned, new shoots would rise, green and tender, from its roots. The whispers then were not only warnings of death, they were also promises of rebirth. Far below the shining crown of Yggdrasil, past the roots that pierced into wells of wisdom and fate, stretched a darkness colder than any mortal night. This was the realm beneath, the shadowed foundation of the 9 worlds, where frost never melted, where breath hung frozen in the air, and where the great dragon stirred restlessly in his hunger. To understand Yggdrasil's strength, one had to descend into its weakness, for even the mightiest tree is gnawed at its roots. Niflheim, the first frost. Long before fire and ice collided to form creation, there was Niflheim, the realm of primal frost. It was a land of endless cold, where rivers of venom and ice slithered together in silence. From these rivers, known as the Elivargar, drifted the frozen mists that seeped upward, brushing the roots of Yggdrasil with eternal chill. Here, mountains stood like jagged teeth, coated in hoarfrost so thick that even sound seemed to freeze upon the air. Winds howled without end, yet the howling carried no life, only emptiness. Niflheim was not a place of mortals, nor of joy, nor of creation. It was the raw beginning, the breath of winter before the first dawn. Its presence at the root of Yggdrasil reminded the nine worlds that all warmth must one day yield to cold, that every fire, no matter how fierce, is eventually swallowed by silence. Hell, the realm of the dead. Not far from the frost rivers of Niflheim lay the land of Hell, a place of shadows where the dead dwelled. Unlike Valhalla, where warriors feasted eternally, Hell was quiet, grey, and unyielding. It was ruled by Hel herself, daughter of Loki, whose face was half beautiful and half rotten, half living and half dead. She was a queen of silence, her throne carved from stone, her hall long and dim. To her came those who died of sickness, of old age, of wounds not won in glory. Farmers who never lifted a sword, mothers who breathed their last in childbirth, wanderers lost in forests, all found their way to her. Hel did not torment them. She did not reward them either. Instead, she held them in her care, neither cruel nor merciful, but inevitable. Her realm was the waiting place where time itself seemed to pause, and where the souls of countless mortals whispered like leaves in the wind. Some said Hel's heart was bitter, shaped by the scorn the gods had shown her. Others said she was the most honest of rulers, for she promised neither what she could not give, nor what was undeserved. Whatever the truth, her presence beneath Yggdrasil was a reminder that every life, whether of mortal or god, bent eventually towards stillness. The gnawing dragon, Nidhöggr, beneath the very roots of Yggdrasil, writhed Nidhöggr, the malice striker, the dragon whose hunger knew no end. Its scales were black as ash, its breath foul with decay, and its teeth sharp enough to shear stone. Day and night it gnawed upon the roots of the tree, seeking to topple it. Nidhöggr was no mindless beast. Its eyes gleamed with malice, and its heart beat with spite. Some said it was born from the venom of the Elivargar rivers, others that it was Loki's kin, a shadow of his chaos. Whatever its origin, its purpose was plain: to weaken Yggdrasil, to drag down what was held aloft. The dragon feasted not only upon roots, but also upon corpses. For from the well of Hvergelmir, countless serpents slithered, and upon their tide came the bodies of the dead, souls not resting in hell, but drifting into the dragon's jaws. Nidhöggr crunched them between its teeth, savouring despair as mortals savour wine. Its feud with the eagle at Yggdrasil's crown was eternal. The eagle despised the dragon's corruption. The dragon loathed the eagle's lofty scorn. Ratatoskr, the squirrel, darted endlessly between them, carrying words like poison. The eagle calls you weak, it would tell the dragon. The dragon calls you blind, it would tell the eagle. And thus the enmity deepened, echoing through the trunk of the tree. The balance of shadows. Though gods despised Nidhöggr, though they cursed the realm of Hel, though they shivered at the cold of Niflheim, none of these could be undone. For Yggdrasil stood not only by light, but by shadow. Its crown reached toward Asgard's sky, yes, but its roots must drink from frost and darkness. Without Niflheim's cold, there would have been no beginning. Without Hel's stillness, there would be no end. Without Nidhöggr's gnawing, the gods might forget the fragility of their world. Odin knew this. He walked even to hell, even to the rivers of Niflheim to seek wisdom. He did not fight the dragon, for Nidhogger could not be slain until the appointed time. Instead, he observed, he listened, he learned, for even shadows speak truths if one dares to hear them. The murmurs of the dead. In hell's halls, the dead often whispered of what they saw. Though silent in their lives' end, their spirits sometimes carried fragments of prophecy. They spoke of dreams in which they saw the wolf Fenrir snapping his chains, of Midgard's sea serpent rising from the depths, of fire giants marching from Muspelheim. Hel listened with her cold eyes and said nothing. Yet Odin, when he visited her realm, gathered every fragment, every murmur. He stitched them into his knowledge of fate, weaving them with the whispers of Yggdrasil's leaves. Thus did the dead, though powerless, still play their part in the great saga, their voices faint as frost, carried into the ears of kings and gods. The inevitable collapse. And always, at the edge of all whispers, was the same truth. The gnawing would not cease, the dragon would never grow weary, the frost would never thaw, the stillness of hell would never break. The roots would weaken, and when the time came, Nidhogger would rise, carrying corpses upon its wings, heralding the end of all things. But even this doom was not despair alone, for after fire and frost, after silence and shadow, new shoots would rise. Yggdrasil would grow again. The cycle would begin anew. Thus, in the shadow of the dragon there was also the promise of rebirth. The gnawing was not only destruction, it was preparation, and so the roots of Yggdrasil held fast in shadow. Niflheim breathed frost into the earth, Hel cradled the dead in silence, and Nidhogger gnawed with eternal hunger. These were the unseen foundations, the dark pillars beneath the shining crown. The gods looked upward for glory, but the wise looked downward to the shadows, and saw there the deeper truth that without shadow, light has no meaning. Without endings, beginnings cannot shine. And in that truth, even the dragon had its place. Far beyond the green crown of Yggdrasil and the grey stillness of hell, there stretched realms so vast and wild that even the gods walked cautiously upon their soil. To one side burned the fire realm of Muspelheim, an endless expanse of heat and fury, where flame itself seemed to breathe. To the other side lay Jotunheim, the land of giants, rugged and raw, where mountains were taller than clouds and rivers roared with the strength of storms. These two realms, fire and ice, chaos and endurance, stood at the edges of Yggdrasil's branches like eternal opposites, yet both were threads in the weaving of fate. Muspelheim was said to be older than memory, a land born when sparks leapt into the void and caught upon the nothingness. It was fire, not like the hearth's warmth nor the sun's blessing, but a consuming blaze, the primal fire that devours and renews. From this realm came Surt, the fire giant, whose sword burned brighter than the sun. He stood watch at Muspelheim's borders, his blade raised like a horizon of flame, waiting for the day when the end would come, and his march would begin. Until then, Muspelheim roared with volcanoes that spat rivers of molten rock, mountains that trembled with heat, and skies glowing crimson with smoke. No mortal eye could bear it, and even the gods, when they cast their gaze, turned away from its fury. Yet without Muspelheim's spark, there would have been no creation, for it was fire meeting ice in the yawning void that birthed the first forms of life. Opposite the fires was Jotunheim, the realm of the giants. If Muspelheim was fire's endless hunger, Jotunheim was the strength of stone, the patience of mountains, the fury of rivers that tore valleys from rock. It was a land of wilderness unbound, where winter storms lashed for months without end, where forests grew thick and ancient, and where creatures of unfathomable size prowled the hills. The giants who dwelled there were not all cruel, though many were fierce. They were ancient as the mountains, vast as the trees, and they bore within them the memory of chaos. To the gods they were foes and rivals, for from Jotunheim often came challenges, thefts, and battles. Yet in truth, the giants were as necessary to the balance as the gods themselves. They tested Asgard's pride, they sharpened its might, and in their very opposition they kept the saga alive. The gods built walls to guard against Jotunheim, yet they could never fully bar it. Frost giants sent storms across Midgard, shaking mortal homes, while mountain giants tested Thor's strength with their endless challenges. Some were wise, keepers of secrets older than Odin himself, while others were brutish, driven only by hunger and rage. In every encounter with them, the gods were reminded that order was never secure, that chaos pressed always against the walls of creation. Muspelheim and Jotunheim, fire and frost, mirrored each other across Yggdrasil's branches. One consumed, the other endured. One sought to burn, the other to freeze. Yet from their meeting had sprung life itself, and from their tension came the endless tale of gods and mortals. They were not realms of peace, but of challenge, of extremes so great that they shaped all that lay between. Mortals in Midgard felt their breath, the burning heat of summer sun, the biting chill of winter nights. The balance of fire and frost ran through every season, every storm, every spark of life. At night, when Yggdrasil whispered, some claimed they heard the roar of Muspelheim's flames in the rustling of its leaves, or the groaning of Jotunheim's mountains deep within its roots. These realms, distant though they seemed, were never absent. They were woven into every branch, every shadow, every dream. Without them, there would be no test of strength, no rising of life against hardship, no final fire to cleanse the world when its time was done. And so the tree held them, not with tenderness but with necessity. For Yggdrasil was not only the bearer of harmony but of struggle, and struggle was the essence of life. The gods feared the day when Surt would step forth, his flaming sword raised to burn sky and earth, and when the giants would march in fury against the walls of Asgard. Yet even in that fear was understanding that without destruction there could be no rebirth, and without chaos no meaning to order. Beneath the eternal crown, the realms of fire and frost burned and froze in silence, waiting for their time. They were not forgotten, for every flicker of flame and every bite of cold was their reminder. They were the edges of the cosmos, the borders of all being, and the unrelenting guardians of the cycle. The wind that rustled through Yggdrasil's crown had never felt so heavy. Even the leaves seemed to shiver, as though the whispers themselves trembled with foreboding. High in Asgard, the halls gleamed with their eternal golden light. Yet the gods sensed an unease that no feast, no laughter, no shield could dispel. Odin stood at Hlidskjalf, peering across the 9 worlds, but even his one eye could not see far enough to halt the shadows that were stirring below. The roots of Yggdrasil groaned, a sound deeper than any horn, deeper than any drum. Nidurga, the great gnawing dragon, had sensed the change, and it rose slightly, stretching its colossal form beneath the ice of Niflheim. Its fangs gleamed like blackened steel, and its breath carried the chill of death into the lowest reaches of the tree. The serpent Jörmungandr stirred in Midgard's oceans, coiling and uncoiling, waves crashing against distant shores. Fire from Muspelheim flared, heating the air above the horizon, while in Jotunheim the giants' howls rose with the wind, carrying frost and rage to all who dwelled between. Odin raised his spear Gungnir, summoning the Einherjar from Valhalla. The air vibrated with the clatter of armor, the stamping of countless feet. Thor tightened his grip on Mjolnir, its hammer pulsing like a heartbeat with the tension of approaching war. Balder, radiant even in shadow, stood in Breidablik, a light that even the growing darkness could not dim, his presence a fragile promise against the inevitable. The Norns had been silent for days, their threads taut with tension. Urd, Verdandi, and Skuld moved among the roots, weaving the final patterns, tying the destinies of gods and mortals alike. None could escape their design, for Ragnarok was no mere threat. It was a certainty written in the leaves, in the whispers, in the rustling of Yggdrasil itself. The Bifrost trembled as Heimdall sounded Gjallarhorn. Its cry rolled across the 9 worlds, summoning all beings to witness the final reckoning. Light and shadow clashed in the skies as the first giants crossed the Rainbow Bridge. Flames licked the horizon from Muspelheim, and Niflheim's ice spread downward, freezing rivers and forests in an instant. Even Midgard felt the trembling beneath its feet, and men and women fell to their knees, hearing the roar of a world unmaking itself. The first clash came between Thor and Jörmungandr. The serpent rose from the seas, massive enough to blot out the sun, venom dripping like rivers into Midgard. Thor swung Mjolnir, and the sky cracked with thunder. Each strike shattered mountains. Each roll of the serpent's coils sent storms across the lands. They fought not merely as warrior and beast, but as forces of nature itself, destruction and protection intertwined. Elsewhere, Surt and the fire giants marched from Muspelheim, their swords blazing like molten suns. Every swing ignited forests, every step melted stone. The giants of Jotunheim moved with icy precision, striking against Asgard's gates, battering them with mountains of boulders, their howls blending with the roar of Muspelheim's flames. Even the mighty walls of Valhalla shook, and Odin's heart quailed at the scale of the chaos. And then the dragon descended. Nidurga surged upward from the roots, biting at Yggdrasil's trunk, shaking the entire tree with every movement. The leaves rustled violently, scattering sparks of light that fell like meteors into the worlds below. Ratatoska scurried wildly, carrying words of mockery and fear between dragon and eagle, their ancient feud now magnified into the crescendo of the cosmos. Even Vedrfolnir, the hawk, flitted in frantic circles, trying to carry warnings too late to alter what was coming. Baldur's light spread across Asgard, attempting to hold back shadows that licked at the golden halls, but light alone could not resist what had been set in motion. Fenrir broke free from his chains, shaking the earth with every step, his jaws snapping toward Odin. The Allfather faced him bravely, spear in hand, knowing that his fate was sealed. No stratagem, no spell could turn the tide. Even the leaves of Yggdrasil whispered of doom, rustling louder than ever, mourning the fate of the 9 worlds. The sea rose, the skies darkened, and the fire giant's heat met the frost of Jotunheim in a cataclysm that no eye could comprehend. Mountains shattered, forests burned, rivers boiled, and the very air vibrated with the music of unmaking. The gods fought with courage unmatched, their strength and skill echoing across the cosmos, yet every blow was met with counterforce, every triumph with loss. Amid the chaos, Odin fell to Fenrir's jaws, Thor fell with Jörmungandr's venom, and Surt's flames began to engulf all, reaching even the highest boughs of Yggdrasil. Valhalla trembled, the Einherjar faltered, and Asgard's shining halls cracked beneath the weight of fire, frost, and shadow. Yet, even as the tree shuddered, even as the 9 worlds seemed poised on the edge of oblivion, the whispers continued. Yggdrasil itself groaned and groved with life, its branches bending under the strain, but its roots clutching deep into the shadowed earth. The tree had endured countless ages. It would endure this trial as well, even if it seemed the end had come. For in every branch, every root, every leaf, there was the promise of endurance. Destruction would rage, gods would fall, giants would triumph, and fire would consume. Yet Yggdrasil, eternal, trembled with the weight of worlds, but did not break. And as the echoes of war and fury filled the 9 worlds, the whispers of fate grew louder, carrying a strange, almost comforting message. Even in endings, life persists. Even in the fire there is seed. Even in shadow there is the hint of dawn. The 9 worlds convulsed, burned, froze, and roared, but somewhere in the trembling, the tree held its breath, waiting for the moment when silence would descend and new life would emerge from the ashes. When the fires of Muspelheim finally dimmed, when the frost of Jotunheim had ceased its unending assault, and when the last echoes of battle had faded across the 9 worlds, there came a silence deeper than any mortal had known. The air trembled no longer, the oceans stilled, even the wind that had carried whispers of doom now moved softly, as if tiptoeing over a sleeping cosmos. Yggdrasil, the great tree, stood amidst the ruins. Its branches were scorched, some shattered. Its leaves had fallen like scattered stars, yet its trunk remained unbroken, roots clutching the depths of the shadowed earth with unyielding strength. Though the crown swayed and the dragon Nidurga hissed weakly from beneath, there was a sense of peace, a quiet knowledge that the cycle had not ended, but transformed. From the ashes of fire and the frost of ruin, new shoots emerged, tiny, fragile, almost invisible at first, yet they were unmistakably alive. The leaves that had fallen began to stir, brushing against each other like whispers of hope. Where once Valhalla had shone and then crumbled, green tendrils sprouted through the broken stones. Where once the frost had claimed rivers and mountains, water returned, pure and sparkling, running along paths carved by fire and ice alike. The gods who had survived, those who had not been claimed by Fenrir, Jörmungandr, or the flames, emerged from the shadows. They moved cautiously at first, their steps unsteady as though learning to trust the world again. Balder, radiant still, walked through the renewed halls of Breidablik, his presence igniting light where shadow had lingered. Thor, weary and scorched, raised Mjolnir and struck the ground, not in battle, but in blessing, calling strength into the reborn earth. Odin, though scarred and humbled, reached out with wisdom, his one eye reflecting the new dawn as he listened to the whispers of Yggdrasil, which now spoke not of doom, but of balance restored. The roots beneath the earth released the last of Niflheim's icy grip, drawing warmth and life back into the tree. Nidurga retreated to his lair, exhausted, gnawing only at the remnants of old decay. Ratatoska paused in his endless chatter, his tail twitching as if acknowledging that even mischief must sometimes yield to creation. The eagle and Vedfölnir spread their wings and circled the crown, their eyes glinting with relief as the shadow of conflict lifted from the 9 worlds. In Midgard, mortals sensed the change. Farmers awoke to fields that were richer, rivers that flowed faster, and skies that carried gentle rain instead of storms. Children laughed as though the memory of fear had never touched them, and elders whispered to one another of the strange peace that settled over the land. Dreams carried not warnings but visions of growth, forests teeming with life, mountains standing proud and strong, seas glimmering with gentle waves. Even the faintest of whispers from Yggdrasil's crown and roots seemed like lullabies, singing of resilience, of cycles that endure, of beginnings born from endings. The Norns, having observed the chaos and guided the threads of fate through destruction, now moved with softer hands. They wove the new tapestry of the 9 worlds with care, repairing the broken strands, tying together destinies shaken by Ragnarok. Life would rise again, even as death had claimed its due. Time, they whispered, would move forward, carrying lessons learned from both light and shadow. Muspelheim still glowed faintly in the distance, a reminder that fire is never fully gone, that it sleeps within all creation, waiting to ignite change. Jotunheim's mountains rose higher, sculpted anew, their strength undiminished, teaching endurance and patience. Hel's realm remained, not as a place of despair, but as a resting place for those who had passed, a quiet corner of balance beneath the renewed branches of Yggdrasil. And Yggdrasil itself stretched higher, its branches reaching toward the sky, more resilient for having trembled. Its leaves whispered not of doom, but of cycles eternal, of growth, of decay, of death, and of rebirth. Its roots drank from shadows and frost, its crown reached into light and warmth, and between the two, the 9 worlds breathed together in harmony once more. The gods and mortals alike felt a strange serenity, a sense that the universe, vast and tumultuous, could endure, could recover, could rise again from any fall. There was awe, there was humility, and there was gratitude. For even in destruction, even in loss, life finds a way to continue. Even in endings, beginnings are born. And so Yggdrasil swayed gently, a living monument to the eternal rhythm of existence. Its whispers lulled mortals to sleep, telling of the 9 worlds and their endless dance, of gods and giants, of fire and frost, of light and shadow, of life and death. And as the stars above reflected the green of the crown, and the roots held firm beneath the earth, all things rested for a time, peaceful, enduring, and ready for whatever the next cycle would bring. The cosmos, fragile and eternal, breathed with Yggdrasil. And in that breathing there was calm, there was wonder, and there was the quiet promise that no matter how fierce the storm, life, in some form, would always rise again.